this exclusive roundtable. So pleased to have you all for this special roundtable series dedicated to the COP26, which is called the Call from Paris to Glasgow. And I'm very, very pleased to have a distinguished panelist from all around the world for these three series. There is some speakers from Europe, from America, from Asia, and also from Africa. So it's a full stack, I will say, representative people from different backgrounds. We are going to run these roundtables, the three roundtables with different tempo within the topics. And I'm going to ask you ask all the participants to do not hesitate to note their questions, and we will dedicate Q&A sessions specifically to interact with from the audience to the speakers. So I will say that we are very in a good tempo for these second weeks of the COP26. That is the purpose of the call from Paris to Glasgow. And for us, coming 6 years ago from Paris to Glasgow, it's also moving from pledges to the practices on the net zero targets. It's also moving from, all the analytics, all the studies, and in particular the IPCC last reports from the practice. And for us, it's moving now from the climate science to the climate finance and the climate technologies to invest in. The first roundtable I will have the pleasure to host is dedicated to how can we massively invest in this new climate tech era, I will say, and for having the great panelists to make this happen, I'm very, very pleased to also present very briefly my distinguished speakers. But before making it, I will just introduce all the agenda. So the first roundtable will be dedicated to highlight the high responsibility of, in particular, the 40 to, let's say, the 80 years old people who are holding a C-level or board representative, and asking a call to action in that sense, because the target of the 2030 is very important for all the decades after. The second roundtable will be dedicated to how can we better transfer the knowledge management, and in particular the tech side, among countries. That it means among the developed countries to the developing countries, and making also cross innovations, and to try also to avoid a maximum, let's say, geopolitical bias within all the discussion to make a real full stack, I will say, net zero everywhere. That it means there is no sense for all of us to be just net zero in one part of the world and not having the capability to make it happen in the other side of the world. The last but not least will be the roundtable number 3, dedicated to, I will say, the title of this roundtable series, Call from Paris to Glasgow, because we would like to share with all of us and all of you the specific purpose we are going to address officially to all the climate leaders, all the global leaders who are gathering in Glasgow and everywhere, and in particular also all the civil societies, on the importance now for us, the real, I will say, emergency to really think about creating officially an international climate agency dedicated to. And the last but not least, at the end, we will just make some announcement also to put forward the practice by the next agenda by our side to co-design with you the Climate Tech Forum It will be all in the next 2 June in 2022. So let's back now with my distinguished panelists, and I'm going to share also in that time my screen with you. If it could work, it will be great. So I've got the great pleasure to have among them different kind of background of people who are there, including background from institutions, background from entrepreneurship, and background from, I will say, the VC side. Some of us are not already there. In particular, we were going to wait Aki Kashi, who is going to be in live in direct also from Glasgow. And I know that Aki is also running some support for the negotiators in real time to make something great achievement happen in Glasgow. So it will be very a pleasure to have him in real time. I will just present very briefly all my other panelists, starting from Alexandre Raguet, who is a serial entrepreneur, founder of Flumo, and also president of the French tech based in Austin in US. So pleased to have you, Alex.
Thank you, happy to be here.
I've got also the great pleasure to have Amin Tazi, who is economist, teaching fellow macroeconomy and in finance from the Paris 1 Panthéon Sorbonne University. Thanks to have you, and very happy to welcome in this discussion, Amin.
Thank you, Fabrice. Hi, everyone.
And we've also have the great pleasure to have Peter Yol, who is the managing partner of Echo River Capital, which is a vehicle, an investment vehicle dedicated to, let's say, water tech and broadly climate tech. Is also an advisor, investment advisor in this field, and also a former serial entrepreneur. Very pleased to have you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
So probably just to introduce, before getting for our first point to share with all the audience, just to make a smart introduction by each one. So I will start probably by Alexandre Raguet, if you would like to.
Okay, so as it has already been said, I'm based in Austin, Texas. I'm an engineer by training, but I spent all my career in finance. The first part was in investment banking between Paris and France, formed by Société Générale and working for Credit Suisse for another 10 years. And after I become an entrepreneur, coming back to France to create a fintech slash clean tech enterprise. It was a crowdfunding platform dedicated to renewable energy. And I pushed it for 10 years, exiting in 2018 with a sale to Société Générale. And now, based in Austin, as has been said, I'm the president of French Tech Austin, so helping startup in France to find a home in Austin.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I will turn to, let's stay in US with Peter.
Hello, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Peter Yawlis, general partner of Echo River Capital. We invest in early stage water tech companies globally to digitize, decarbonize, and decentralize the water cycle. And our vision for the future is living in freshwater harmony with nature, made easier through technology. And we quantify impact metrics and progress towards solving global water challenges for human health, the environment, and climate resilience. Previously, I was founder and CEO of WaterSmart Software, providing data analytics to 200 water utilities across the US, Canada, and the UK. And I've spent 30 years in sustainability, climate, and water over the years, trained in finance and in environmental policy. Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, please, Amin, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Amin Tazi. I'm a French economist. I'm specialized in microfinance. I've been working since 15 years right now. I have semi-public, semi-private profile. I worked 4 or 5 years at the French Treasury. I also worked at the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I worked recently as chief economist at the French DMO, Debt Management Agency at the French Ministry of Finance, and then at the French Banking Federation, and that's it. Academically, I'm belonging to 2 universities, the Toulouse School of Economics and the Université Paris-Sorbonne, and I'm specialized in microfinance. So that's it. I think I said everything. So I'm happy to join the call today. I think it will be really constructive regarding the challenges of today, which are really about the matter of financing and orienting the financing toward the climate and tech corporates.
Okay, thanks, Amin. Probably for the following discussion, I think that there is a smart interaction between you and your microphone. If you can just be a little, yes, not too much close to your laptop, it could be much more comfortable but it's just a matter of setting. So I'm going to start this first, roundtable introduction by saying this, that now we are very grateful to the global international leadership 6 years ago, making the Paris Agreement live. I will say that the IPCC report in August is without appeal, something which is very, not only important, but very huge to take care and to embed in all the agendas of decision makers, let's say all stakeholders. And now for being net zero in the next 20 years up to, let's say, 35 years, it will very, very hard, and it's a global ambition today. Making all our economic model from the micro level and the micro level is very, very hard to shift. And this is all the purpose of this specific roundtable. I will say with this roundtable, we're going to try for all of us and all of you the key frontiers from the entrepreneur side, the investor side, and to engage how incentivizing the 40 to 80 years responsibility in this new history, I will say. How can we make it happen in less than 1 decade? How attracting those kind of people by creating, I don't know, like a climate prizes to make some new competition toward and among all financial players. We'll try to make this roundtable like a do tank. So do not hesitate to contribute, not to go, I will say, too much mainstream, but to be closer on the frontier of the issues. It will appreciate for all of us. I will say just briefly that we have to switch all the humanity GDP in Earth-year model, let's say it like this, the low carbon model. But to make it happen, we need maximum financial packages from local to global, converging to climate tech. If we dedicated on the climate tech segments with an S, it's very important. Let's say like this, it's quite the core engine, the new core engine of the global economy. We could say that, just to paraphrase the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, just some weeks ago, who said that the next 100 unicorns or startup, whatever, who is going to have a value around $1 billion will be in climate technologies. He's not the only one who is saying this, but we know that organizations at the macroeconomic level, from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, have also their role to play to make these incentives. So pleased to start this discussion by asking specifically to you, Alexandre and Peter. Now we are 20 years ago since the first, let's say, green, clean, or ClimateTech wave. Now we are in the climate technologies new investment aligning with the massive green recovery plans. What is the key difference between the first wave of clean or green tech and this new wave in 2021 today? Who would like to start, Alex or Peter?
I could start. So the clean tech wave or green tech from 20 years ago is quite different from climate tech. And we learned some important lessons. About clean tech, we addressed humanity's impact on the environment, while climate tech is expressly concerned with the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, which is a major driver of climate change. And really there were, we all know that clean tech led to a demise and a wind down of investing back in about 10, 15 years ago. And the reason was that it was a combination of three factors that caused challenges and headwinds for clean tech. We learned that these deep tech companies needed more money, they take longer to mature, and then they got crushed by the 2008 financial crisis. So that combination led to the demise of what we think of as clean tech. But in climate tech, instead, we are thinking about a broader set of technologies and industries. It touches on a wider variety of technologies, and it touches on energy, transportation, agriculture, oceans, manufacturing, construction. Those are the new areas of climate tech. And they are whole industries that need to be redesigned to cut emissions to zero or close to zero in the next generation. So that's a sort of a brief overview of the difference between clean tech and climate tech.
Yes, thanks Peter for this first input. Let's turn to Alexandre. What will be your view?
So thank you, Peter, for also some detailed view, and I agree with everything you said. It reminds me of being a clean tech entrepreneur in the 2005 and 10 period. And now, as I said, I'm helping a lot of climate tech startups. And for me, the biggest difference, first there is 10 years, and in 10 years, a lot of things have changed. So the definition are not the same, the players are not the same, the amount are not the same. But the biggest difference, and the one that makes me very hopeful for the next stage, and you have a bigger crowd and a more sophisticated crowd that are financing all those climate tech. So bigger, meaning that the first clean tech, so it was John Deere's, it was Al Gore that launched the movement, and it was a very savvy investor, a very small amount. You know, the first wave clean tech was 25 billion over 5 years. Now we most likely just gonna have 25 billion next year. So what we raised in 5 years is what's gonna be raised most likely next year. So, but what is happening now, and it was, of course, after analyzing the failing of the clean tech wave, it's not only VC, it's a full capital stack. So you have startup studio, you have SPAC, you have people, philanthropists, people like Bill Gates that are putting money in different stages. So you have now the full continuum of financing. And that was really something that was lacking in the first wave, that those VC had no way to exit. And that was how they lost half of the money they invested in the first wave. So more people and more sophisticated. Climate tech has tech in it, but it has nothing to do with the internet wave. It's not only software. Most of it is hardware, and hardware is more difficult, take more time. So maybe there was a little of naivety, I would say, from the first wave to try to have the same return in clean tech as in all software tech, like the internet wave. And that now everybody understands it's not going to be the same. But to continue to attract capital, you have these other players that came into the space, the more sophisticated one. So you have all the public money, what we call blended finance, that help the entrepreneur to find a business model to their startup, and people like Bill Gates, Catalyst, that are gonna help to, not with public money, but with philanthropic or people from private, but in a different way, to be the off-taker of the technology, like we see with Climework and the Orca carbon capture example. So it's, the complexity has been understood, and there is now a complex set of financial tools to solve it. Sorry, I was a little long.
No, perfect, Alexandre.
So,
it's the broad picture that gave me also the opportunity to also ask you, Amin, because we are going to have a macroeconomic view. Institutions are very involved. Alexandre mentioned the blended finance now mechanism. Let's say shortly, we used to call public-private partnership. We will have another discussion on the next roundtable, also from the partnership and cross-border partnership. But let's stick on the climate investor side. On the macroeconomic level, global institutions like International Monetary Funds, central banks, and what is your perspective? Now we have to just switch with, like this, the core engine, and the core engine of the economy are institutions, and in particular banking institutions, central banks, and those international institutions like the World Bank. What is your perspective, your overview on this field? Yes, I mean, you're probably in mute.
Are we okay?
Okay, perfect.
Sorry. First of all, I just wanted to say that I was totally agreeing with what my colleagues said. Hopefully, things changed since 10, 15 years ago. And today, what I wanted to stress is that, first of all, I think there is more consciousness that climate is a public good. This is really important, economically speaking. The second thing that I wanted to stress is that we are living in a post-COVID world in which financing is not a problem. This crisis gives us the opportunity to deal with structural issues, and I think climate issues are on the top of it. So this is in line with what Peter just said. I mean, hopefully investing in ClimateTech really improved and developed since 10, 15 years, and that's totally important. And macroeconomically speaking, now there is a global agreement that we need macroeconomically more sustainable growth models in the long run. We need economies that are more resilient, because there is some intensification of the loopbacks between the economic impacts of climate effects and economic effects, and there is also, and what we're seeing every day in the news, there is future shocks to prevent. So to conclude, I just wanted to stress one thing that maybe people not have in mind. The OECD published a paper in 2017 called Investing in Climate, Investing in Growth, meaning that, basically speaking, there is a urban legend, to speak in Franglish. There's people who think that the return on investment for brown investments is more important than the return, the ROI on green investment. The OECD concluded in its paper that no, if we invest green, our return of investment on investment could be higher than brown investments. So that's it. Today, financing is not a problem. I think the most important challenge is the orientation of the financing toward the good company, the good tax, etc.
Thanks, Amin. I will be back to you, Amin, on a specific question, and I will ask also at the same time, turning now to this point, this I will say quite the third point, to Alexandre and Peter. We have learned a lot according to the market maturity from the solar industry, the wind industry, the electric vehicle industry, which is not a mature one, is the mainstream one. If we look at on the TV, all the advertisement, there is quite all for automotive equipments, all yes, say players, from the older to the pure player ones, all is about low carbon engine, and in particular electric vehicle. So there is no doubt that 20 years after, we are in the mainstream maturity, but today we have not this time to find, and investors who don't have the time to wait 1.5 decades to find a maturity. It's a business perspective. And for the, I would say, the science perspective, we don't have that time to make a maturity of a segment, each market segment happen. We have to be net zero in very, very short term. How can we learn from this first wave to transfer very fast and to improve this new climate tech wave, to fast track the maturity both from the technology side and the market side? How can we learn? What would be your insight, your input in this issue? Who would like to start, Peter or Alexandre? It's up to you.
Alex,
Peter,
go
you
ahead.
want to continue? I go ahead. Okay. So yeah, the solar example, and the one I know well because I was in industry for 10 years, is the one everybody is referencing. You know, the solar photovoltaic effect has been discovered in 18 something, the first by a French man, yes. The first photovoltaic panel has been put on satellite in the 1950s, 1970s, and it's been put on the ground later, and it has been a very, very long time, something like 50 years from a technology that works to something that you can deploy in a big scale and with adequate financing. So as you said, we don't have those 50 years. But we learn a lot with the solar. As I said, blended finance is a great tool, and solar will have never been able to mature if there was not subsidy from the government, in Germany mainly for feed-in tariff, and maybe in other way in China, the way they produce the panel at a very low cost. So, and as I said, the crowd now is sophisticated enough to copy and paste those kind of mechanism, and to help the entrepreneur in the new technology, carbon capture, sustainable air fuel, long-term battery, all those technology that have a huge green premium, to find a way to reduce this premium, not in 20 or 30 years, but very quickly. And as Amin said, there is a lot of money now in the market, and everybody is trying to do that. And I'm very hopeful there is a lot of good example. I give the one from ClimateTech, so carbon capture. And it's not only financing the SPV or financing the, sorry, I'm talking too technical. So the new central, the new power plant is finding a way to buy the offset. For example, for climate work is Swiss Re that has committed to spend more money to pay the green premium for 10 years to buy a carbon offset at 10 times the price of the market. So we have all those tools now. We really have to deploy them very, very fast on all the technology that are important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks, Alexandre. What could we learn also from the water tech perspective, Peter, to apply and to shift to the broadly climate tech segments?
Sure. So I was an entrepreneur towards the end of the clean tech wave. I was building up a software business serving data analytics to water utilities with a focus on water efficiency, which remains a strategy for sustainability and climate resilience. Today, the focus in water technology is more around decarbonizing the water cycle. And there are massive global companies that realize that climate change is water change. The water cycle really is the climate cycle. And the main effects we all realize now of climate change, the main effects are water related, increasingly frequent and severe droughts, deluges that lead to flooding, and sea level rise inundating our coastal cities. But if we are to solve climate, we can also center water and solve for those water effects, and we can solve climate change at the same time. But first, we need to stop burning hydrocarbons and releasing methane, and we can do that and accelerate investments in all these things if we understand the interrelations between them and the fact that if we go slow, the opportunity cost will be much higher. So it's going to cost us more if we go slow than if we can go much more quickly to invest across all of these industries, really centering water and centering climate in all of our business decisions. So I think thinking about that conceptually and solving for that and going quickly will be a key.
Okay, thanks a lot also, Peter, for this specific input that, and we do think that we have to better highlight not the segment, but the foundation segment of water tech, because we know that water is everything on this planet, and we are going to talk further on the last but not least question in that sense. So I will turn, thanks Peter, I will turn to Amin to have your perspective from, to find global cycle in the economy. Now everything's going faster. We mentioned also with Alexandre and indeed also Peter, the fast cycle in the digital segment. We have to run in quite the same time, the acceleration, but at a macro level. What would be your input? What will be your, I will say, your idea to accelerate, but in the good way, to accelerate macroeconomic mechanism in the good way, without, and it will be the last but not least of the question, without in the same time, as we said, creating a bubble. Because when the cash is here, we're going to go fast and sometimes faster, too much. And when it's too much, there is a bubble, because we don't take the time enough to make the proper due diligence to find out the good projects from the quality, from the tech and the team project to deliver. How can we fast track and in the same time not creating a bubble? Because we don't have this, we don't have this, I will say, inconvenient to embed in the loop. We have to avoid all of this at the same time. What would be your please?
Well, you stress the most important ideas, Fabrice. I think it's a matter of everyone, the climate, etc. I mean, I'm sorry, don't you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just wanted to say that it's a matter of everyone. First of all, we need the public authorities, starting from central banks to governments. We need to work everyone in close hands. And yes, there is the risk of growing bubbles, and we have difficulties of fast tracking the evolution of companies and the orientation of investments. Something that where these issues materialize is, for example, the difficulties to develop the European taxonomy and define what is really green, what is not green. It's really complicated that way to orientate the flows of money that exists, but hopefully there is new growing companies that need time to mature, but we have to follow them and screen the work. And yes, of course, there's a metaphor that comes into my mind. Let's see the climate investment as a train, and there is two locomotives. There is the brown finance and the green finance, and one cannot go. They have to work in line. I mean that the green finance need to pull up the brown finance with her without penalizing like investment, because economies needs investment, especially when we come out from crisis like today. So I think it's a matter of freedom. So we do not have to penalize the regular investment, brown investment now, but we have to pull it up thanks to accelerating the investment in green finance. And I think we could all agree about that. So it's a matter of freedom and not overpassing, not letting the brown investment overpass the green one, but the opposite. We have to keep the green investment ahead of us and take the brown one to follow it. So that's the way I see things. But yeah, I think we all of us agree about that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I will stay just with you for this other complementary question. I mean, what come in mind also, it's about, you mentioned the green taxonomy in Europe, because it's about also creating a market. And the taxonomy is supposed to be a good tool to make everyone agree on something, to describe and to allow capital in what we have to do. But first, I will say, in one hand, finance is global. And the other hand, taxonomy seems to be geo-economic compliant. There is the EU green taxonomy, there is the US green taxonomy, there is the Asia green taxonomy, in particular the China green taxonomy, and at the same time, at the background, finance is global. How can we also make those mechanisms much more faster compatible from all those taxonomies, I will say, data set or approach or framework or schemes? Because it's going to create barrier. Sometimes it could be according to protect and to have such of economic sovereignty. And on the other hand, it wouldn't also help the global common target to be net zero. If there is two barriers, we have to be full stack compliant from the ground to the scheme and reverse, but it means to fast track the compatibility between taxonomies to create a better dialogue with financial players. What will be your input on this field?
Actually, you're right in all the analysis you just developed. The problem is that climate is a global matter. But the thing is that there may be unconvergence of interests and of objectives depending on where we live in the US, in Europe, in Asia. So ideally, I don't like to speak ideally, but we would need an international climate agency, but it's a matter of global governance. You know, decisions at the COP26, as in United Nations, even if we take just the example of Europe, taxonomy, European taxonomy is complicated to design quickly because if we take just the Euro area, 19 countries, different, south of Europe, north of Europe, blah, blah. So it's quite different. It's quite difficult to make views converge and to define a basic taxonomy that fits to all. So yes, I think we can agree that this is a matter that is really complicated and that it needs time. But you know, the events like the COP26 and the declarations of global leaders are here to set the road to these kind of agreements. But yes, ideally, we would need, in a perfect world, an international climate agency to draw the guidelines, and then all over the world, we have national authorities and governments to implement and follow the road that has been designed. Yeah, I would have said that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Amin. I will turn to, highlight some priority within the ClimateTech segments. I will turn to probably Alex and Peter. I do think that, of course, that water is a good piece and a great piece of all the ClimateTech segments. But for your experiences and your perspective, what will be respectively your top 3 segments to address? Probably I will start with Peter.
Sure. So I thought it might be helpful to think about where we're investing today, and then talk about a little bit about how the VC model is applying here. So the 3 segments that I think are so super interesting in water and climate related technologies are what I think of as the 3 Ds of water tech and climate tech investing. First is digitizing the water cycle, which is water's analog. We need to digitize that to track things with remote sensing, with software, with sensors. The second is around decentralizing wastewater treatment for humans and for animals. The old 20th century technologies of centralized wastewater treatment municipally are long gone, and we need to think about leapfrogging that technology. The third D is around decarbonizing the water cycle. In the US, 20% of all the electricity goes to moving, heating, and treating water. So there's a lot to wring out. And then I'd also like to bring in the notion of what's happening in venture today. We have really kind of a barbell strategy what's happening. Like for me, I'm in a micro VC, and technology and software today are making it much easier for new emerging managers like me to start up venture funds and to drive innovation at the pre-seed and seed levels of new innovation, at pilots, bringing in new technologies, going to market, really innovating around that. And then we see a lot of these large PE and growth funds coming in, like TPG, Brookfield, Generation, KKR, Breakthrough, Galvanize. These are huge, billion-dollar investment firms that are accelerating the deployment of massive amounts of capital, spending or investing tens of millions of dollars into every round. And I think that is super exciting, and we need to link those up, the emerging VCs with the really large growth and PE venture money. We've seen some of the big funds maybe starting at the seed scale too, but really there needs to be a link up between in the sort of Series A to Series C to really allow and bring those early innovations and to broader commercialization. And I think that's one way to accelerate this and to drive these new innovations that really are going to be a key part of solving our climate crisis.
Okay, thanks a lot, Peter, for sharing this. And it's indeed resonated with us by ClimateTech Venture and what you do also in US. It's very not only interesting, but it's amazing to see what happens in the ClimateTech, let's say, in US. I think that it's now just the new economy. Climate and technologies is just the economy, the new economy as usual. I think that it is. For the part of the world, it could be a segment, sometimes a niche, but I do believe that it will be much more mainstream now. So I do appreciate your input, Peter, and just consolidated on your track record in the water tech is very, very important. And again, it's a foundation for my side. So very great to have a practitioner from both sides of the table in this round table. But I just keep online. Peter, I will be back to you for the last but not least question. I will ask to Alexandre. What will be for you, your top 3, the very key segment to highlight and then to invest and support?
Thank you, Fabrice. So for me, the top 3 is first, renewable energy. So continue to deploy wind, solar in big amounts. They are mature on price, but there is still a lot of bottleneck to deploy. So it's to continue to push those. The second one is electric vehicles and their batteries. And actually, the second one is linked to the first one, because thanks to the deployment of electric vehicle, if we have the right tools, and it's all the climate tech around smart charging, we could have more renewable energy being produced on the transportation network if the distribution can absorb some of the energy when it's not ready to be consumed, but when it can be stored in the electric car or every kind of longer term battery storage. So for me, that's the second one, EV and their batteries. That's here, it's not mature. Of course, you have Tesla, but it needs a lot more of investment and deployment of the technology. And the third one is completely different, but it's to solve all the other problems that clean transport and clean electricity are not going to solve. It's carbon capture. If we can have a solution to capture CO2 at a good price, that's going to be able that's going to be very important to arrive at net zero quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very good, Alexandre. And I will probably just take 1 minute to go deeper on the last one that you mentioned, the carbon capture. There is different kind of segments,
of course,
like direct air capture or CCUS processes for upcycling, reusing the CO2, connecting also with other new, not emerging, but big one on hydrogen sectors. And there is another one, which is the CCS, pure CCS, carbon capture and storage, which need massive capitals investment because it's about infrastructures or a frontier on the climate tech and geoengineering, I will say, embedding very great issues also. But to solve the climate equation, we do need to capture all what we have already emitted, much more than 1 century and a half. It's already there and makes the global warming. And it's also pre-programmed that there will have massive emissions from different parts of the world. So those 3, I will say, to sum up, those 3 segments are very different and in the same time needs also different quality of capitals. What a VC could play in this field, because it's about not only investing, it's about engineering, it's about big industry like energy players, oil and gas players who are concerned, the big AV industry like steel, cement industry are concerned. And it's a mix of, I will say, a mix of blending finance and technologies and engineering. What would be for you the very key priority to address? Storage as a CO2, trying to find a way to upcycling, investing in R&D to better upcycle the CO2, or the, as you mentioned, ClimateWorks, the segment of direct air capture. What will be your top 3 within this the last three?
I don't have I don't have a top three between in this one. I know I think that there is not a winner right now. There is not a clear winner, and it's not going to be a winner takes all market. So we have VC has to invest in all of them, test the technology, make it work, make it cheaper. But VC alone are not going to do it. You know, maybe VC can be very good in software for smart charging. They don't need help. It's, you know, it's where they are the best. But for something as complicated as Climeworks, as we've seen in example, we need a lot of help for, you know, from government and from other partners. So I will not try to pick threes, but but I think that there is a different way of approaching each one. You know, planting trees is a solution too. We have to replace what we cut, and we have to make sure that then they're not going to be burned and again. So, but and I don't think a VC is a good model for that. The one I gave as an example, and I know that in breakthrough carbon capture and direct air capture is one of their subjects. You have to have someone who is happy to pay the green premium to lower it down, to have a massive scale and economy of scale. As we know in the solar, it was the German government, feed-in tariff. In the US, it was the investment tax credit. We need the government, but what we need to is philanthropy companies that are happy to offtake the product and to pay the green premium for a while, just to make it go to zero. So every technology is going to have a different model, financing model with different players. And I can't give you a three best one right now. It's very hard to compare apple and oranges.
Yes,
I push everybody to try to solve this problem.
Sure. And I do appreciate that you mentioned in different ways the green premium, and in particular in CCS technologies. Probably we have heard also that we need people. You mentioned also philanthropist ventures, like we spoke about the great guys like Elon Musk, in fact, and Bill Gates. But Elon Musk, indeed, I've just sent a month ago that he just gave a ticket just 100 millions just to have a look on CCS technologies, and we like to find out what's coming on this ecosystem. We need much more people like this, and in the other part, government and indeed any ministers wouldn't have the 100 million to put just to have a look on something. And we know we need this kind of breakthrough or deep tech disruption technologies to invest, because if we don't have a look on it, we're going to go deeper and further to find the right solutions. So I do believe that, as you mentioned, gathering people, and as you mentioned also, Peter, finding a great way from the small, the micro VCs to the big ones will be a part of the solution.
You mentioned, I think at the beginning, I think the BlackRock Foundation give 100 million to break through the new venture, the Catalyst, which is going to be just, try to replicate what has been done in solar. And with BlackRock, there was something like 5 or 10 big US corporation, big corporation, not only US, they just gave 100 million to be that catalyst. So there is a lot of good inflow of money and good willingness to try to solve this problem.
So thanks, Alex. I will just, for the 5 last minutes we have, to turn to the real last but not least point. When preparing these roundtables, and in particular with some of you speakers, we try to find a way aligning better our works to find good business model, but aligning with the best compliance with the nature. So I would like to open this door with you and to find what, for your side, what kind of things have to be changed to be in our daily job much more compliant with the real nature model, not the business model, but the real nature model. It's an open question. I would like to hear from you and to inspire, to send to the audience and to the other players, to the peers players, your own call to action. What has to be changed in our habits or in our mindset to be much more compliant in practice with the nature? Who would like to start? Yes, Peter, please.
I'll start. Yeah, thank you so much. It's a really important question. I think that should guide a lot of our investments and our allocations to different sectors in the climate and water area. I think one of the questions is how can we be in full alignment with nature in our investments and our actions? And I think that's all around changing mindsets and our habits. In regard to water, a lot of indigenous cultures think of water as a living being, holding intelligence. And I think that one way that we can do that in our daily lives is to respect and honor water as a precious resource and an entity to itself. We have to be careful around water. In many ways, we've lost the value of water. We just turn on the tap, it makes it easy. It comes out into our glass. We've lost connection with where the water comes from, the effort it takes to gather and clean, move and heat the water. If you have a view from space, right, we can see it, it's the water planet. 70% of our bodies are made of water. And we've lost this consciousness, if you will, about what water, the role water plays in our lives. And so the call to action really is to think about water, not just automatically as we turn on the tap, but to really think about it when you pour water in your glass, when you step in the shower, when you take a swim. Really think about water in that way. How do we stretch it further? How do we reuse water? How do we protect water in nature? So this is our chance to adjust our mindset, to have this call to action, to embed water protection in all that we do and in our investments too, and to think about regeneration in all of our economic activities, not just to minimize and make efficient our use, which is important for the productivity, but to protect and regenerate the water and the resources and the sources where the water comes from. So I hope we'll think about that and change our mindset and how we approach water in the future. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Peter, for sharing this. And I will turn and back to the entrepreneur and VC side after, but turn to Amin, to the microeconomic level. What has to be changed? What is a must now to change within, I will say, global institution, in particular, the financial institutions?
Well, I first of all just wanted to say I totally agree with Peter. It's really a matter of mindset and consciousness, and there is simple things. As individuals, we have to keep in mind just to look around us and keep in mind, for example, that it's an intergenerational issue. What world do we want to leave to our children? And we just need to look around us, like in different parts of the globe where we live. We can just look at the North countries where if we are in the South, and the opposite, to realize that it's a common good and that we need to work collectively to transmit to the other generations a better world than the one we live in today. And here in Europe and live in France, I think there is a societal question about what is the meaning of having child today, what do we want to give, to offer to our children. And yeah, it's kind of basic thinking, but I think it's really important, the matter of consciousness, and then financing all this transition. In my opinion, it will follow, it will really step up this change in mind and mindset and consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks, Amin, for this point. I will be back to you, Alexandre. What will be your call to actions, in particular, I will say first to the entrepreneurs and to the young generations who now have the habit to say we have to protest, we have to make us better hear from the global leaders and decision makers. But I do believe when I'm making ClimateTech ventures that all these energies, all those young people who are going to live with this, has also both the responsibility to say we are not agree with the model, but also to build the new model. What will be your call for action for the young entrepreneur's mind?
So for being an entrepreneur, for having interacting with entrepreneurs for the last 15 years and the VC, their financiers, my call to action will not be to the young generation. They don't need a call to action. They are here, they are ready to move, they are quitting their jobs, the other job to come to ClimateTech. So they are doing their part. I'm very happy. It was not the case 15 years ago. You had to be crazy to move to clean tech. Now it's the mainstream. I'm interacting all day long with young professionals that want to be in ClimateTech, even if it's less paid, even if it's more risky. And you have all the VC, of course, I'm interacting only with VCs that are in ClimateTech, so the VCs are doing their part. My call to action will be to another part in the investment continuum, where I'm still very surprised that they are not moving as fast as the other one. It's what we call the LPs in the VC world, in the investors. And so I'm not gonna have no time to do a full demonstration. So I will just echo Larry Fink that we've been mentioned a lot. You quoted in the beginning, and he put it simply: climate risk is investment risk. Meaning every investor that doesn't put climate in his grid of analysis as a risk is going to suffer one day or the other. So my call to action will be to those LPs, those investors, don't follow Alex Raggy advice. Listen to Larry Fink.
Okay, thanks.
He knows a little more than me in investment.
Thanks, Alexandre, for sharing this. And it's also, I will say, rebooting to the title of this specific roundtable. And I'm just taking probably one remark or one questions with some part of the audience is, it's not just investment perspective, but to really bring the scale and impact, what go to action the youngsters you would suggest. Okay, so I think that you have addressed the purpose, Alex. And yes, thanks for the question from the audience. And I will say probably to reboot with the title of this specific roundtable. It's a call for action to say to the 40 to the 80 years old people who sit on the C-level positions, who sit on the board, who have the capability to decide to invest or to not invest in, to take the risk or not. And you mentioned that climate investment risk is a climate risk and reverse, Alexandre. So we just to probably to conclude this roundtable, that we don't have really the time and we don't know how to build 100 and much more, 1,000 Tesla, 1,000, I will say 100 Google, 100, I will know, Microsoft, because pivoting is the global core economic engine, just like this. And the echo that ring me that you mentioned it, I mean, also it's an intergenerational problem. and probably to conclude that today, it's not the job of one part of one generation. It's a part of all people who live at the same time, from the youngest to the oldest. But the specific core is from people who have in their hands the capability to decide to invest or not, to take the risk or not. And this is I'm fully aligned with all what you have said. I will say my distinguished panelist speakers today, Alexandre Raguet, Peter Yols, both from US, and Amin Tazi. I will just find my screen to just put everyone on the top like this. And thank you again for being with us, also the audience.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure all to have you stay for the next round tables, and just do not hesitate to ask some questions or comments. And now I will turn to the second, I will say, panel to welcome now Caroline Dama from Africa, in particular from Kenya. Caroline is the country coordinator from the Green World campaign, and she's also to present better herself. Hi, Caroline.
Hello, Fabrice.
Perfect, perfect. I would like also to present you Christophe Poinçon. Christophe, who is the Deputy CEO and Scientific Director of the BRGM, which is a French geological survey, based of course in France, but in particular, I don't know, Christophe, if you are based in Paris today or in Orléans.
To be very precise, I'm on the way back from Paris to Orléans. So I apologize if my connection is not perfect.
Okay, so you're in the go-between on the two cities. So great, great. All connected in the same loop on this round table. And probably also Gilles, my other speaker, Gilles Rabin, who is the Chief Innovation Officer and Applied Science Director by the CNES, which is the French National Space Agency, who is going to join us with a little bit minutes of delay. So before introducing and getting directly in this panel, I will just mention some few words by saying that funding climate, as we said in the first round tables, is a big issue, but not the only one. Everyone knows that at this moment, currently people are converging to find ways to transform pledges in agreements for net zero, and to find the good tempo that it means, the good decade to be net zero. Most of the countries, and indeed some public and private organizations, have made their commitment on it. But to be full stack net zero, it doesn't mean that there is the leaders in the net zero wave and the followers. We all have to be net zero, supposedly to be in the same time. To be very full stack, really full stack in practice, to be net zero, we need not only funding from transfer from the developed countries to the developing countries, we need also to scale all the knowledge, all the expertise, all the technologies to embed and customize locally. And in reverse, we could also learn a lot by the reverse engineering process from the developing countries to the developed countries. I will say now we have, let's say, 3 superpowers who make those solutions cross-border available. First is the public and the private cooperation that everyone knows. The intergovernmental agreements and the tailor-made agreements countries per countries. And the second is the rising impact private investing and the philanthropist phenomenon now dedicated to climate finance. But there is still some gap, and great gap, to go on the ground. And there is also not funding, not technical gaps. There is also momentum within the geopolitics, I will say, dynamism or mechanism. That is all what we are going to explore here. And then I will just quote, I was quote Larry Fink for the, from BlackRock for the first roundtable. Now it's the turn of Gandhi, who said, to progress, we must not repeat history, but to produce a new one. We must add to the heritage left to us by our ancestors. So from this, how disrupting the time to make it happen for everyone and everywhere. Just start with this, and I'm very pleased to introduce Caroline Dama, and just to give you the floor to present yourself in 30 seconds, 1 minute, and after going directly in the different issues. Yes, please, Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fabrice, and thank you for the introduction. So briefly, I'm Caroline Dama, and I'm from Kenya. And thank you for this opportunity, especially for someone that's from the indigenous community. I think one of the criticism that the Conference of Parties that's going on, the 26th one, is that maybe they're not engaging a lot of indigenous communities. So I'm hoping by being here, I can also lend a voice to that and also add value to the talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. I will turn to Christophe, just to introduce yourself. The floor is yours, Christophe.
Thank you, Fabrice, and hi to everybody. So I'm very pleased to be with you today. So I'm Christophe Poisson, the Deputy CEO and Scientific Director from the French Geological Survey, BRGM, and I have a very long experience in the field of science and development, research and development, let's say along the nexus between energy, climate, environment. And so I will be very pleased to share our experience in BRGM with today roundtable. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome, Christophe. Yes, just have the connection with Gilles Rabat. Hi, Gilles. Please have you just introduce you better, very briefly.
Yeah, sorry for the delay.
No problem, you're welcome.
Yeah, I'm working for the CNAS, which is a French space agency, and I'm a director for innovation, application and science. That means that yesterday we were with Thomas Pesquet, and today I'm very happy to be with you.
Okay, great. From the Earth, from the space to the Earth, and we're going to go deeper in that specific.
Exactly.
So thanks all of you for being in time. I will start with you, Caroline. You know, there is a lot of attention when we talk about impact investing, let's say patient capitals. And when there is a lot of talk, I would say, from all the waves we have seen, there is a bubble. When there is a bubble, there is no good delivery. So from this kind of investment, how to avoid, from your perspective, the impact washing when we call about tech transfer? I will say it will be the first part of the questions. And the second will be also to complete how to be stronger when we have to make some due diligence, when we have to invest cross-border in projects, in teams.
Okay, thank you for the question, Fabrice. I think what we've noticed that towards the move of, there's a lot of move towards climate focused investments, yes? And so, and just to talk about it, it means maybe sustainable forestry, investment in clean energy access, climate mitigation and adaptation. And of course, that comes with the measurement of impact and it has to be done in an ethical way. Most of them impact investors, want to make sure that they can talk about impact the way it's happening. So how can you make sure that it's happening and it's in an ethical way and that it's data driven? So for one, I think most of them want to answer the question is, what is the outcome of my investment, and whom is it affecting, and in what ways, and what are the long-term effects? Whether you are an immediate impact investor, or like you talked about, a patient investor, if you're looking at it long-term, you want to ask those questions. And so how can you ensure that the impact that you're doing is transparent and auditable? I think for me, the obvious answer is most people move towards maybe looking for third-party verifiers, people that can look into the impact and say that, yes, people are reporting this impact, and I can verify that it is true. But I can think that the best way to ensure that impact really talks to what it does involves the community itself. It's the only way to avoid impact washing. People run away from asking the community that is being affected by the investment, how is this investment affecting me? And how can you talk about impact from a third person? So I made the investment in the community, and I'm the one saying this is how I think it's impacting the community. I think the best way to go about it, empower the community to be the ones doing the measurement of impact. Have them interact with the data, have them do the data collection, and also have them analyze. Let's get the point of view of the community. Let them say, this is how I think this investment is impacting me. This is how I look at it in terms of social, economic, and ecological values. That's the best way. So I think the process has to be participatory so that it can be both. Some talk about bottom-up approach. I think that would be from the community itself, but I also want to talk about from maybe the organization itself. So that will call about data, and how can we deal with that data in a way that ensures that it's ethical. I think we have to talk about things like blockchain technology, yes? People have leveraged on technology. One thing that I'm noticing about people talking about right now is also harnessing the power of youth. Most of the youth are really interacting a lot with technology, and we can use that to make sure that the impact that we are reporting is happening the way it's supposed to. So how can you harness things like blockchain technology so that you ensure that the data that is being collected is, one, you can't interfere with it. Once it's put in there, it is coming out the way it's intended to. And also for you as the organization, you can use the data to make some informed decisions. But most important is for the community to look at the data and say, yes, we are saying this is how it has affected us, and this is how it has impacted us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks for this first input. And you mentioned that the technologies, in fact, and in particular blockchain, could deliver and let's say bootstrap the trust natively when we have to deliver the capital and flowing to the projects. Just to have also the complementary view on the crowdfunding, I will say, mechanism. Have you any use cases? Because crowdfunding, it's about, yes, a tiered party like a platform who's going to collect the money, but also it's embedding natively to create natively a community around the project and to embed from all the I will say, from the shareholders to the end users, all the stakeholders are embedded in the same loop. Have you any use cases and directly oriented in the climate or social climate impact you could highlight and share with us?
Okay, so for me, I can talk about maybe community-driven crowdfunding. And I think it's important to talk about things like, I don't know if people have heard about community currencies. I wanted really to highlight about the bottom-up approaches to crowdfunding. And I'm talking about harnessing communities' own inherent resources. So most of the time we feel that, I think one of the criticism as Africans we have is that we tend to look outside. We want the crowdfunding to be done from outside, from other countries. And yes, I know there's a call to action to most of the developed countries because they've had the most contribution towards climate change, and that we are the ones bearing the brunt. But I think that we can also support and build the capacity of communities themselves to be their own inherent crowdfunders so that we meet them halfway. So that as an investor, if you crowdfund, you can bring the resources, but how can they be sustainably managed if the community itself cannot also harness its own resources? So a good example is that, for example, where I am, communities were able to use community currencies. And how do they work? They work in such a way that the community is saying we do have the resources and these issues are affecting us. And we can harness our own individual skill sets so that we can add value to this. And so what happens, for instance, we can harness the cooperatively owned businesses of communities. So the communities pool resources together and they invest it towards a common pool. But they are intentional in their investment such that this community pool also makes sure that it gives back to ecological benefits in the community. So what do I talk about ecological benefits? For example, riparian lands. Does it harness the community and help them resource mobilize so that they are able maybe to plant trees along riverbeds, or so that they can be able to do good agroforestry initiatives? And then because they're already pulling the resources on their own sort of community level crowdfunding initiative, it's easier for them to sustainably manage other crowdfunded resources. So I think for me, I'd like to highlight more about communities' own inherent resources to be able to crowdfund so that we build on that and then we can bring in more resources from outside.
Okay, yes, thanks very much, Caroline, for highlighting these use cases about how the tech and in particular blockchain and crowdfunding could play a role from the ground to deliver natural-based solutions. I will be back to you just a couple of questions after to how can we now fulfill not only natural-based approach solutions, but technical or technological-based approach from cross-border. So thanks, Caroline, for this first part. I will turn now to Christophe from the BRGM to say BRGM is the, let's say, the institution dedicated to geology expertise from France and already run some cross-border programs. I would like just to have your example, your point of view, Christophe, from the cross-border cooperation that BRGM has already run, and yes, just for the introduction.
Thank you, Fabrice, for the question. So, in fact, we have a long experience in the field of international cooperation. The BRGM, the French Geological Survey, is roughly 60 years old. And since the early times, it has been involved a lot in Africa, in South America, in Middle East, and so on. So we have a long experience of cooperation. This cooperation has been dedicated to several objectives. So let's say the first one was to help the country in this continent to develop and to develop their own geological surveys, their own expertise. So we have been strongly involved in the development of competence, in the structuration, in the organization, on some geological surveys in foreign countries, in Africa, for instance. And we are still involved a lot in the training and of the young generation. And I'm just taking an example. We have a current European project that we are coordinating, the name of which is Panavgeo, and it aims directly to train the scientists all around Africa in more than 40 countries in order to help them to be able to have a more in-depth knowledge of their underground resources, their underground risk, and therefore to take in charge their own future, I will say. And we have probably two main lines or two main questions which arise. So the first one is a question of the water resource, and I'm just making the link with what has been already discussed in the previous roundtable. So we have a large number of cooperation in this field. Just for instance, right now we are working with people in Namibia in order to help them have a good knowledge on the way their water resources may evolve under the influence of the climate change. And the second item is natural resource, mineral resource. And it's a topic which is very important because in fact, it's directly related to the energy transition and therefore the global mitigation against the climate change. So it was one of the example of cooperation, long-standing cooperation we have with cross-border countries. I want also to stress another topic which is quite important for me and which is in direct relation to what has been discussed before regarding the data. I mean, if you want to have good knowledge, good understanding, a good anticipation of what's going to occur regarding the natural environment, you need to have a good set of data which has to be available for anybody worldwide. And therefore, we are for sure producing a lot of information, a lot of data as a geological survey. And we are strongly involved in the development of the open science around this data to make all this data available, findable, reusable by any people, and also to ensure the interoperability of the database which are developed with this data. That's something quite important because, in fact, if we want to be able to not only track the different evolutions that may occur, but also anticipate, predict what could be the long-term evolution under the drivers of the climate change, we need all this data to be available. And I'm just taking one example. For instance, we have a very well-known project which is called One Geology, and which really aims to share the data on the resources, structure of the underground worldwide. And I don't remember exactly the number of countries which are around the table, but it's very significant. So it's a kind of involvement that we had for several decades in the RGM, and which is, I think, quite important. And I will finish with that. It's also in close relation with other French institutions like the Research Institute for Development, ARD, which is also very well positioned, located in Africa, abroad, let's say, in developing countries.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks a lot, Christophe, for highlighting these different use cases, and in particular the point of the data and all the competences that we have to embed when we have to share the knowledge. So you mentioned the data scientist and also scientist cooperations. So it's the perfect link with now Gilles from the CNES, and from the space perspective, there is a lot natively, I will say, international cooperation, because space is global also, like climate. And it's also a real use case, a real opportunity for humanity to converge from, as Caroline mentioned, from the top to the down, bottom up, or to the top down level. I would like to stay in space, because in space we have a lot capability, and some climate parameters are only recorded from the space, not on the continental layer, but from the space. This is the only way we can collect, monitor them. And in particular, yes, for this first part, and we will speak further and deeper on the Copernicus, of course, program. But I would like just to have your first feeling, Gilles, about space. This is the best, or one of the best, I will say, framework for global cooperation toward climate. Is it?
That's the best and the worst. The best, but the time being the worst during Trump administration. If you will remember, there's a tough time when the US said that there is no global warming danger and so on. Now we are back to the reality in the US and all over the world. It is very interesting for us to see that now we have to develop the essential parameter. You know, you have 50 essential parameters regarding global warming. 26 are only from space, a parameter from space. Then you need space to have a global overview of what's happened regarding global warming, regarding local and regional impact. The objective we have is to cooperate with local and regional administration, authority, because that's a place where we can develop a mitigation policy. The objective is not to say there is some COP, some big meeting, big conference on the world regarding what's happened globally on the Earth. The problem we have is talking with mayor, talking with regional authority and say, what is the impact of the global warming for your region? What is your capacity to develop a policy regarding the mitigation of this problem? That's the way we are working, and we are developing what we call Space Climate Observatory. And the challenge we have, as Christophe said, the question is not a problem of data. We have a lot of data free of charge. The question is very important, is our capacity to understand and to develop a business, a policy with this data. So we are working in Africa, in South Asia, not to say we give you this data, it's okay, you have it, game over. No, we need and we develop data scientists in Africa, data scientists in South Asia, because if there is data scientists in Africa, in African city, in African region, in African country, they will be able not to ask for data, they will have data free of charge, but they will be able to develop their own policy, their own mitigation policy regarding global warming. That's the way we try to work in space. In space, we have no border. We are working with all the people. Perhaps the French agency is very unique because we used to work with other countries in the world. 50 years ago, we worked with the SSR, Russian, Union Soviet, and USA. At the time being, we are the only one space agency working with the USA and the Chinese Space Authority, because we need a global view. We need a global data on what's happened on Earth. That's the way we worked. Then we need a global cooperation, and we try to foster this cooperation regarding CNES. And we did to develop the policy with the local authority, with the data scientists on the ground.
Gilles, may I react to your point?
Yeah, sure.
I take the liberty of taking the floor. No, I fully agree with what you mentioned, but I take the opportunity just to stress the very significant issue we have regarding the data science. I mean, everybody wants to have a data scientist, and a lot of companies, a lot of activities want to hire the data scientist. And there is a real tension regarding these skills and these guys. And it's very important to be able to keep some of them for the global warming mitigation, the environment issue, and so on. And it's not so easy because, as you can imagine, if you go to work to the GAFA, for instance, the salary at the end of the month will not exactly be the same.
Sure, so you're right. The question is not to have the people able to have a PhD on data scientists and so on. The question is local authority with data scientists. We're working in Senegal with local authority, and we're developing a data scientist school in Senegal. That's the way we work. That's the way we work. We don't want to have a big head, fat head, talking about data scientists on the worldwide global warming data system. What we're going to say, if we want to have a local response to the global warming, we need to have local scientists, data scientists on the ground. There is no space without ground segment. We need a ground segment. We need specialists, as you do in Africa. I know. I already know. As you work very well with Africa. You are very well with South Asia because we work this way. We develop cooperation. We develop expertise.
Yeah, for sure.
On the ground.
Sure, right.
We need you on the ground. I'm on the space, but I need this specialist on the ground.
Sure.
We agree.
Yes. Thanks also for this key interactions that allow me to be back to Caroline to say, let's keep on the ground the things about knowledge management transfer. First, not only the money, but the knowledge management. The key point, according to what we've said, is about raising up massively a global community of data scientists because everyone needs them. And there is a competition between institutions and indeed between public organizations and private organizations with a dumping of the salary. We mentioned that climate and all those data/climate are a common good. How can we fulfill, from your perspective, Caroline, raise up and distribute the knowledge to raise up this kind of expertise? There is specific expertise that we need on the ground. What would be your input on it, Caroline?
Thank you, Fabrice. I think I'd start by saying that I like that we have to think global, but you have to act local. So I like that people are drawing down to looking for ways to build the skills of local people. I'm also thinking that if you look at one way of measuring impact, people uses the SDGs. And I like that goal number 17 talks about collaboration. So I think all this is about collaboration. It's about bringing diverse skill sets together. But I also think the world has moved to a place where we have to make data open source. Because when you're talking about the space agents, there are a lot of data available, even like for Google, that could really help people make informed choices about climate change. And all it has to do is become open source. And also I'm thinking about, like, for us coming up with a solution, maybe we have an app. We have an app that measures soil, yes, and we want real-time data. And we have somebody that has a satellite. And all we need for the community is to be able to take a photo. And maybe this community doesn't have access to those satellites. Is it possible for such things to be possible so that they can just collect data about this is the location and this is how our soil looks like right now. And you want to be able to show impact in biodiversity changes over time. But we lack the technology to be able to take the real-time photos. Somebody has the satellite or they have the drone and they can be able to do that. So I think it's about collaboration, one for multi-agencies that have access to things like satellites or drones, but it's also about accessing knowledge, especially for university students in terms of research. Because sometimes when we measure impact, there's the impact that we intend. But most of the time, sometimes you get unintended impact. But how would you know about the unintended impact if you don't open yourself up to research outside your comfort zone? That means collaborating with other actors that be able to point out different levels of impact. I also think that we need to mainstream. Sometimes, yes, you may not be able to get a data scientist on the ground, but you may get somebody that has done computer science or somebody that has been taught about data that's a youth in their local university. Is it possible to mainstream and add value to their local training? And sometimes it's just short courses, and the world has moved online right now. So it's easy to do really short courses and show the communities how to be able to do it. Most of the youth are very adaptable. They learn things really fast, and though they need this the step-to-step. I like that he talked about decision makers and policy makers. For them to be able to do that, they need to make informed decisions, but they also have to come to the knowledge that adaptation and mitigation is about skill set. Most of the communities that I live with know that it's changing, but no one has told them that it's climate change. And this is what you can do to adopt, or that in your own small way, you're contributing to carbon emissions, maybe because of your lack of proper waste management. So all they need is the information to be able to do that. But also, maybe some of the communities, rural communities have not gone to school, but they have people living among them that can be able to train them. So I think we need to localize training to ensure that communities have access to it, but I'm calling for mainstreaming also. And finally, I'm calling for collaboration across all sectors. We need to have researchers that come from across different sectors so that when we talk about impact, it has to be both intended, it has to be also be able to measure unintended impact, and in so doing also in a way we verify and we add value, we give a nod. We say that this community has been able to communicate this impact. I'm also looking at the soft part of any technology. Sometimes, yes, you may go collect data, but there's the soft part of technology. Like there are some cultural aspects to how we interact with nature that sometimes we are not able to also bring out in data. So it will be important as we do that to also draw down to how we can be able to harness and check those other impacts that we didn't intend.
Yes, I will be back to you, Caroline, in this last point, because it's also the very other side of the solutions. We used to say that net zero is a coin with two sides. The first, we mainly focus on the tech solutions, but the nature-based solutions and the communities who live in their regions are also from, when we used to speak about open innovations, it's about the crowd who's going to raise up the innovations, and those innovations are already there. We have just to find a way to scale them, with or without the tech, with or without the data. It's global, but indeed now we're much more focused on the metrics, the analytics on the topics, but it's not the end of the day. It's much more global. So yes, I will be back to you, Caroline, in that sense. I would like to be back to Christophe. In particular, when we are preparing this roundtable, and this is the purpose of all the roundtables here, is to touch the frontiers of the topics we would like to discuss. Let's come neither from the funding gap, neither from the tech or the knowledge gap, I will say from the geopolitical gaps. When it comes to be net zero, we are mainly also oriented in an energy approach, how to find the good mix of energy, or energies now, I will say. But we know that some countries or regions are build their leadership from the energy sector. And indeed, when it comes to be net zero, there is some different tempo in the agendas. From your perspective, Christophe, and I know that you know very well when one or many parts of the energy sector, and now being net zero with not the raising, the rebirth, probably with the nuclear power to contribute to be net zero now. It's clear on the agenda. What is the geopolitical, or what are the geopolitical dynamism we could better tune in another way to make things happen closely in time, shorter in time? Yes, Christophe, I think you are in mute. You are in mute. Yes.
Sorry for that. I apologize. My battery is rather low, so I hope it will not be cut down the connection.
Okay.
Yes, just to say that in fact the energy is a real issue, and I want to stress several points regarding this topic. The first one is that there is no single solution, and so it means that each country has to develop its own energy mix depending on the characteristic of the country in terms of geography, in terms of climate, in terms of resources, and so on. So it's a very important message, because in fact, at least in Europe, I know that many countries are trying to copy and paste basically what others are doing, anticipating that the solution is the same for every country, which is not the case. Second, we have a real problem of time frame. I mean, the energy production, whatever you consider, is a very long time frame infrastructure. So when you build something, it takes decades. It will produce during decades, and it will therefore build the energy system for quite a long time, which is well beyond the political time. So it means that in fact, there is a real difficulty on how you can connect the time of the decision, which is a political time, with the time of the energy, which is quite different and much longer. So the decision which are taken right now will have only influence in some decades from now. And the situation which is ongoing right now is depending, in fact, from the decision which has been taken probably 10 or 15 years ago. So it's very difficult, therefore, to have a very short-term influence of the political decision. And that's one of very important point, because in fact, we all know that for the climate, we have no time to lose. We have to change very rapidly the energy mix, at least in terms of carbon or greenhouse gases emissions. And therefore, it means that we have a kind of discrepancy between the time of decisions, the time of policy, the time of which is needed for building the infrastructure, and the need.
Yes, I think that yes, probably it will be for the next round table for another time. So we're going to be back. So thanks, Christophe, for highlighting this tricky point of the different tempo and agendas. We try to be back if you can connect later. It will be a pleasure. But indeed, we are going to follow up by this with you, Gilles. Now to highlight, I would like to have the overview effect of the Copernicus program, because it's an amazing one and a real example probably to scale up again. It's a great track record, but we can, and probably we must scale up it, facing the issues we are already. Yes, please, Gilles. You are in mute, Gilles. You are in mute. Yes.
Yeah, now.
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, Copernicus is a fantastic program. It's a European Commission program developed to have an overview of what's going on the Earth, what's going on parameter, gas emission, level of sea, and so on. That's a very important program, and the data we collect is free of charge. So that's two very important things. It's a program considering the planet, considering the evolution of the planet, and we have what we call an heritage. That means that we have data from 20, 30, 40 years ago, and we can compare the evolution, and we can have a global view of what's going on the reality of global warming regarding not only the planet, but the cities, the region, and the different countries. That's very interesting. And as a thing which is very important is free of charge. Each country, each people, you have a computer, you have internet connection, you can ask for this data and collect this data. The question is the same thing. Okay, we have this opportunity, this heritage, this global view and this fantastic amount of data. It's impossible to see this global overview of how could you measure this data? You know the figures. We have collected more data in the last 10 years than in the beginning of humanity. Then it's very impressive. But the question is, this data is like ocean. If you don't know what you're looking for, you will drunk. It's impossible to find a solution. But the very important question is, as Caroline said, is to develop connection with collectivities, local actor, university, and say, of course, you have access free of charge of this data. But to transform this data on policy, on local policy, on mitigation for the global warming, you need to develop your own know-how and your own capacity to manage this ocean of data. Data is no more a problem. We live in a world where data is no more a problem. We have a lot of free of charge data. Copernicus is a very good example. We're like in Europe and developing a free of charge worldwide data. Then, if you're looking for space data, you will find what you want. The question is, how can you transform this data in policy, in action? And that's why we need to develop local companies, local startups, able to transform this data to policy, to information. Data is nothing. Information is a key. Then we have a lot with Copernicus. We offer a lot of data, but if you are not able to transform this data on information, it's vain. It's unusable. Then the very important question, as I said, is we want to develop this Copernicus constellation. We want to deepen and deepen this information collection, but we need a ground segment. We need the capacity to transform this data in information. That's the key factors regarding, in my opinion, global warming. Global warming is a global overview. Other people know the big figures. Many people, and sometimes I don't understand what's going on. Really, in reality, the speed, the time, the deadline, and so on. It's very difficult to understand something. But if you're talking, as we try to do, with the mayor of Saint Louis de Senegal, if we're talking with the mayor of Le Caire, and you say, okay, we can show you the evolution from your city 10 years ago, today, and today to 10 years, the future, what's going on, what kind of data you want, and what is the consequences of global warming for your city. If you can offer this information, then the mayor of Saint Louis de Senegal or the mayor of Caire would say, okay, now I understand. I know what's going on for my city. I know what's going on for this evolution, and I can act. Of course, we need a global policy worldwide, but we can begin as well with local authority and give us the capacity to develop their own policy. Satellite ground segment is a solution, but we have to transform data in information.
Thanks a lot, Gilles, for highlighting this, that all the tech is just the beginning, the data are the beginning, and being back also from the Caroline perspective, to transform on the ground, we could say, to sum up, that Copernicus is a great tool who's already work as an enabler for cooperation, not only cross-border, but for local regions and neighbor countries who have to face in the same region, geographic zone, the same issues, and to better cooperate neighbors to neighbors and to find commonly their local solutions. That is all about, we will say.
Yeah, Copernicus, like data satellite, is only a door. The door can stay closed or you can open the door. If you have to open the door, you need to transform this information, this data and information. But you have all door able on the worldwide, free of charge. We are not the US. We are offering the data free of charge. Then we are not Google. Then free of charge means each country, each university, each local authority can have this data. The game now is, what do you want to do with this data?
Yes, thanks. We are great to to find that we are that we speak about common access and common good on the same topic, and the metaphor of the door who has to be open or not depends on the quality of the cooperation, and hope that following this way, much more doors will be tailor-made open, because it has to be tailor-made. We mentioned with Christophe the tricky agendas when we used to speak on the energy side with cooperation between countries, which is a very, very difficult point sometimes in the dialogue, in global dialogue. I would like to go back, for the last 5 minutes, to go back to Caroline and to go deeper on this last but not least question. This is a call from Paris to Glasgow, Caroline. Glasgow is running, COP26 is already running. Just we have 3 days ahead, and it will be the start from the next 2027 COP after. So Glasgow is not finished now. We're still connected with them. What is your call to action? And I'm pleased also to I think that Christophe is back for this conclusion. Very good. So yes, the floor is yours, Caroline.
I think for me, my call for action will be asking leaders to really leverage on community participation. All the policies we can make in the world, all the meetings that we can make, they will not be sustainable. Because when you talk about sustainability, we are talking about balancing generations of today and future generations and ensuring that whatever we do can transcend times. But that can't happen without community participation, without giving a voice to the people that are being affected by whatever you're talking about. Because you come up with pages and pages, but if it is not found a way to be drawn down to the community itself, then we are not doing anything much. We can't talk about impact that does not involve the people that are being affected by whatever, if it's funding or whatever. I think we should also start leveraging on community inherent resources. Like what the previous panel said, the problem with everything right now is that there's a detachment from what were our values before. Because I come from a country whereby our elders are still able to conserve forests without much tech, because they're in tune with it. They understand the cause and effect. If I cut the tree, there's this effect. They understand how to relate to the forest. So if we cannot go back to that and have communities get in tune with that, do more programs that will ensure, as much as we are going towards adaptation of climate change, but then we want to leverage on the inherent skills of the communities themselves. So whatever we do, let's add value to what is already there. Let's build existing skills to what is already there, and let's not try to add more. That's the only way we can move towards sustainability. And also my call to action is that let's leverage on the youth of today. If there's ever a generation of people that are really concerned about the changes that are taking place and they are willing to give a voice to it, it's today's youth. And they're the most in tune with technology. They're the most in tune with data-driven solutions. They're the ones that look at forms and transform them. And so let's merge communities with this youth, and let's move towards community participation, because every community has knowledge. All they need is just skill set to be able to use that knowledge sustainably.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, thanks a lot, Caroline, for highlighting this, that we, as you mentioned, the previous roundtable is about blended finance. Probably we can talk with the tech transfer, not only on the tech, but the blend knowledge from the elders, the older, and the native knowledge, and the tech and the information knowledge, bridging the old and the new, and in the same box. It's probably the new kind of culture we could find innovative solutions with going to come out from this. So I do appreciate your input and your call to action, Caroline. I will turn to Christophe, who is back to with the connection. So yes, we're going to take the opportunity to have Christophe, I would say your own call to action from Paris to Glasgow.
Thank you. I apologize for what happened just a few minutes before. I'm in my office right now, so it should be okay. So my call for action, I would say I would like to promote some change in mindset. And the first one is to move from emotional approach to rational approach. I mean, there is a lot of emotional reaction in all the issue in connecting to the global climate change mitigation and so on. And I think we really need to have a rational approach, which is very difficult to develop and to follow. I mean, because we need to have a really holistic approach, taking into account everything. But the question we have to face, and we have to find the right answer, is how we can make the better use of the limited amount of energy, of time, of money we have. And I can also add of people and skills. I mean, we are in a limited world, and the limited world is for anything that we need to in order to face this very significant and challenging issue. And we really need to take that into account. Each euro or dollar we spend, each hour we spend in order to try to find a solution, we have to focus our effort on where it is the most efficient. And the second point, I want also to make a call for pragmatism. I mean, we need to find a pathway which is suitable. I mean, that we can follow, that we can deploy, that a pathway that is adapted to each country, but that each country can follow. And we have to be careful to some statements or recommendation or so on that are given, but which are far from any reality, because only a limited proportion of people are ready to follow this pathway. And we need to promote something which is manageable and that most of the people will agree to follow and to move forward in this direction. It's quite important, otherwise we will exchange words and the conference we follow to conference, and the situation will more or less always be the same.
Yes, thanks for also this new way back to basic on the reflection and yes, in converging or probably delaying, not the time, but delaying from the emotional approach that you mentioned and the reality. We could, I would say, click and connect, not collect, but click and connect directly, which is feasible for the ignition, not to after 1 year or after 3 years back to other side. There will no constant sense and direct line to follow. It will just disturb and discourage all the stakeholders involved in the loop and all of us indeed. So thanks a lot, Christophe, for your call to action. And I will be back to you, Gilles, for this special call from Paris to Glasgow. I would say from the space to the ground and reverse. What you would like to share? What would you like to ask? What would you like to see something change, happen not far, but closely?
Time is ticking. I want not to be pragmatic. But the question is for me, listen to the mayor of city or small village. They know what's happened regarding global warming. And they are not competing like US, France, Great Britain, and saying what's going on, where it's possible to do this thing or not, and you have to do some efforts, and you are not doing this one. Forget this one. Listen to these people. Listen to this mayor. Give them, the mayor of small village, give us the capacity to understand what's going on, and they will give us a solution, because in local authority, they have the capacity to develop mitigation policy, and they not compete with other village or other countries and so on. They know that in 10 years, their village, their own city will be not habitable. We can no more live in this city. And if we ask these people, if we listen to these people, they will give us a solution, for a pragmatic solution, but for a political solution as well.
Yes, thanks also, Gilles, for sharing this and highlighting this. And I know that it's not far from your previous track records, but it's a real reality that everything from the local, as we mentioned also with Caroline, that from the ground to the top approach, and local, let's say the regions or the city is at a human scale to approach the climate. So yes, I do agree with this. So thanks again, my great distinguished panelists. Stay here, stay with us for the last but not least roundtable that we are going to just to switch, because it's the roundtable dedicated from the title to highlight from you mentioned, and you are three representatives from the social entrepreneurship, from the tech expertise from the ground and the space expertise on the data convergence that we need probably a one-stop shop international climate agency. You mentioned, Christophe, that it's important to deliver the expertise to help some countries or region to build up from scratch their own geological survey institutions. We do think that for climate it's the same. And we are going to switch now with this last but not least round table.